GOB-related projects during the Facilities and Construction Committee meeting. This is the item before you. I want to thank Mr. Carrillo again for coming. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Dr. Steve Gallen III, our Vice Chair, Ms. Baez Geller, Dr. Dorothy Bendros Mendengal, Ms. Maria Teresa Rojas, and Ms. Santos. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is the item before us. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Dr. Dorothy Bendros Mendengal and Board Member Rojas.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. And I want to thank my colleague for bringing this item to us. Since I've been on this board, I've been told about our delay in paying contractors. And then I was told that's why it's such an unbalanced kind of group wherein certain people will work with us and certain people will not because they can't afford to, because they don't get paid in a timely fashion. So Dr. Navarro, thank you very much for bringing the item, and we'll be following you and your leadership to see what's going to happen once you hold those meetings. And if you could let me know, I'll speak for me, when those meetings are going to be held. I'd like to sit in and be a listener and, of course, be a participant if that's appropriate. Thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Bendros Mendengal. Ms. Rojas?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Carrillo, for coming out and taking the time to speak with us. And also, thank you to Board Member Navarro for bringing this item forth. As a matter of fact, even prior to that, I had heard concerns related to this issue, so I have been in constant communication with Mr. Perez. I actually sent out an email with several questions regarding F40, which already passed on consent, but that had to deal with change orders that were less than $50,000, and they were being brought to the board for approval. So based on the school board policy that we currently have right now, which is 6345, the change order state that the superintendent may approve and execute any construction contract change order items that will increase construction contracts by the amount of $50,000 or less, or that will decrease the construction contract amount if the approval is in the best interest of the board. So I've had questions related to why some change orders were coming to the board when they indeed were less than the $50,000 threshold that was needed for us to be the ones to address the issue. So again, it is an issue that many vendors I know have had concerns about, but I did speak to Mr. Perez, and he explained the entire process to me and responded in writing, because I also asked to have a detailed report on the closeout process of projects and the retainers of the construction. So he did explain that. So through the chair, I just want to say thank you once more, and I'm looking forward also to the follow-up that has been requested by Board Member Navarro. In addition to that, I have additional follow-ups to the email that I sent. So thank you very much for bringing the item forth, and I will say that Mr. Perez has been very gracious and responded in an extremely expeditious manner, and I know that he said he was going to be addressing the issue. So at this time, I just want to say thank you, and I'm glad to have been a co-sponsor to the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? I too want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, Board Member Navarro. This is a very, very important, very relevant very highly discussed item and issue. I'm very happy that it has come before the board and proud to be a co-sponsor. I would like to, in the spirit of who I am and what I advocate for, Dr. Bendros Mendengal and myself, we would agree that this is not a new conversation that we face in Orleans, and give me the restaurants. Liberty City, Overtown, Miami Gardens, it's late. Trader Joe's,
Yes.
okay? This is an issue that is widely discussed.
All the time.
With all due respect to what is represented, what is articulated, what is said, what is advertised, the reality that comes from the people who do business in this space with the Dade County Public Schools, they have a different reality or a different perception. And their perception is their reality.
That's right.
Their perception is their reality. I've heard it time and time again, and I think it adversely impacts small, local minority businesses who don't have the full capacity to address some of the cash flow gaps, which was something, by the way, Mr. Torrance, I know we always articulated and advertised when we rolled the GOB out, that we were going to mitigate and create a gap and a strategy to bridge the smaller businesses by expediting payment. So this is not an issue of expediting a payment. This is an issue of paying me pursuant to the policy of the school board vis-a-vis on time. So I've heard this time and time and time again. This is year 5 for me. I've heard this time and time and time again. And people are very direct. I don't want to do business with the school board. They say it. I don't want to do business with the school board. There was one slide that you put up that talked about change orders, and it also talked about work that is requested during the course of the project that is outside of the scope of the initial project. Everybody following me? You have initial project, and as that project unfolds, there may be a need to do additional work. So it's often said, proceed with the work, and as a good partner, as a good vendor, as one who does not want to risk that relationship, what do? They proceed with the work, and we'll figure it out later. Now, being as transparent as I am, I've told some vendors who talk to me about that, I say, well, that's your problem. I would not proceed unless I have something in writing. Well, Dr. Gallen, you don't understand. You know, we're dealing with the 4th largest district, you're dealing with a $1.2 billion bond, and we want to continue to have a good relationship. So we try to be a good partner in the middle of the project, but that partnership is not reciprocated at the end of the project. So then that negotiation becomes somewhat one-sided. Can somebody respond to that? And staff knows exactly what I'm talking about, because I've had at least 3 documented cases that have come to me that I forwarded to staff, and 1 or 2 litigation lawyers got involved, so clearly I could not have a conversation. But can staff speak to that particular issue, because that is something that repeatedly I hear. And what happens in that situation from a business standpoint is that the vendor has already incurred costs to proceed with the work that was outside of the scope of the initial contract. So those costs are not offset, those costs are not remunerated, and that's a widely held perception. So can somebody respond to that through the chair?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. First of all, I'd like to welcome the meeting with Mr. Carrillo, and although he was intending to meet with Mr. Perez, I'm going to also participate in that meeting. I'd like to say, you know, we all, obviously this is an issue that we are very concerned about. We have now approaching $900 million of expenditures in a highly audited program that's been reviewed by external auditors, by internal auditors. for years. Change orders are among the topics that have been addressed in these audits. So we know that as a practice, the change order process is generally in good standing. But there are individual cases, I mean, and we address those as they come up.
Thank you.
There are, I believe there's 2 contractors that are represented by Mr. Carrillo's organization. We welcome the opportunity to pursue that. The change order process, and I'll let Mr. Perez come up and give you more detail if you need it, but absolutely, the change order process is to cover scope of work that was not originally contemplated when the contract was awarded. It is a negotiation. The contractor many times is directed on small change orders to proceed, and the price is there's a scope that's defined at the beginning of that. There's an estimate. Many times there's agreement. Sometimes there is an agreement and requires some negotiation at the end. But let me, with the chair's permission, ask Mr. Perez to get in a little bit more detail, and then we welcome the opportunity, as Dr. Navarro's item calls for, to make a full presentation to the board in October, and to meet with Mr. Carrillo, the Contractors Association, and get to the bottom of this.
Before Mr. Perez responds, and I'm all for the association, let me go to your item. The item, however, with all due respect to the speaker that is speaking on behalf of an association, some of the people that I run into, Dr. Bendros Mendengal may run into in Jackson Soul Food. That's the one I was talking about. Jackson Soul Food, Arlene's, Lorna's.
MLK.
MLK, they may not be a part of the association. So the item does not speak specifically of working on an issue to resolve it with an association. The item really speaks to resolving an issue in total, in general, associated or not. That's an issue. So one of the things you said, Mr. Torrance, you said that in the middle of the scope where a change order may come up, a contractor may be directed to move forward. Is that direction codified in some shape, form, or fashion when it's requested, or is it codified or negotiated at the end?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, it is up front. The scope is defined up front, and if I may, let Mr. Perez get into the details of the mechanics of that for the benefit of the board.
Okay, as he prepares to get into the details, let me dig a little deeper. Is it contractually codified? Contractually codified, because you have a contract, you have a scope, and if there's a deviation, then that contract would require some kind of an amendment. So is it contractually codified, any changes that are asked or directed by the district staff to vendors?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, yes. The change order is in effect a change to the contract, which codifies that scope of work that's to be done.
Okay, but you conceded that there are some instances in which that codification may or may not have taken place, and that there's a disparity in terms of what the scope was initially, what they did, and how much is owed.
No, Mr. Chair. What I'm saying is the value of that scope.
Yeah,
The scope is clear up front. We know if we're asked to install extra electrical outlets, the scope is clear. We have a cost estimator that knows what it should cost to install those outlets. The price may come from the contractor that's different from that, and that's where the negotiation starts. This is not done arbitrarily. We want to be fair to the contractors that are doing work for the district. It's never our intent to shortchange a contractor, but there may be differences in opinion as to the price or the value of a particular item, and there's a process to address that, and that's the change order process, and it typically comes to a resolution at the end. Nobody gets necessarily what they want as part of a negotiation, but I think we treat our contractors in general fairly because of the amount of money that we've already invested through the GOB. These are certain isolated cases that come up, and I understand that you hear anecdotally of particular instances, and maybe it's subcontractors, and that's yet another level of discussion. But we, if you'll allow Mr. Perez to go through the detail.
I'm getting him. You
Okay.
said something I want to reiterate, though. I want to capture something you said. It's contractually negotiated at the time of the change order, but then the costs may remain in dispute post work completion based on what the cost estimator calculated versus what the contractor actually did. So if there, in my estimation, there are certain terms that come with a contract: scope, time, and costs. So when that modification and/or amendment is made pursuant to a change order, aren't those costs determined then? Because what I'm hearing you're saying, the scope is determined, but then the cost estimator at the back end makes some determinations as it relates to how much it will be. Because I think once you amend that contract, it should be, we want you to do X at this cost as a part of this change order. Not do X and then we'll look at what the cost estimator determines at the back end of the project's completion. That's what I kind of heard you saying. If you can clarify that, that would be helpful.
Yes, Mr. Chair, yes. The cost is known up front. The scope is known up front. But in some instances, after the work is performed, or during the course of performing the work, there's a dispute with regard to that cost. They present an estimate up front, and that estimate needs to be validated by our cost estimators. We cannot just go strictly by that estimate. So,
I'm not going to belabor it. It's late. I hear what you're saying. I'm very intrigued, Board Member Navarro, with where this is going. But it's no secret. I'm not a contractor, but I spend a lot of time in my real estate endeavors getting things done. So it's very difficult for me to come in and tell somebody, I want you to lay wood floors over my rental property, and we dispute the cost at the back end after they finish. I think we're very clear on the front end of what it's going to be. Now, if they say you want to switch up, you want to add a room, this is going to be an additional X, additional Y, that's done. But when that project is assigned to someone, whether it's a new toilet, whether it's a new granite countertops, whatever it is I'm doing, those costs are determined on the front end. And if I deviate from that, then we have that discussion, up front. Not do the work and then we'll figure out the cost later. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. And I will qualify this. All of my comments are not predicated on any anecdotes. These are predicated on some things that I've been able to really take a look at. So not to belabor the cost, the time cost. I appreciate Mr. Perez being prepared to speak to that, but I'll be respectful of the item. I'll allow Board Member Navarro's item to proceed and allow the entire board through the process to take a very, very deep dive into this issue that I faced from the time prior to me getting on the board. This was a conversation that happened. So again, thank you, Mr. Torrance. Mr. Perez, thank you for being ready to respond to that. And whatever communications will take place with an association, that's outside of the scope of what this item is, and it's clearly outside of the scope of what I'm interested in long term, because some of the people I have to advocate for may not be a part of association, although we appreciate your advocacy on behalf of the issue, I have no further questions. Anybody else has any questions? Okay, motion to, yes, yes, please.
I would like to co-sponsor.
Okay,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Co-sponsors were, okay, Dr. Steve Gallen, Ms. Lucia Baez-Geller, Dr. Dorothy Bendros-Mendengal, Ms. Maria Teresa Rojas, Ms. Luisa Santos. We'd like to add Board Member Hampton. Move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A motion on the item as amended.
Move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion
Mr.
to
Chair, I
move.
just would like to thank Mr. Carrillo for coming and staying all night for this item. Thank you.
And can you, I would like to get an email of those 3 or 4 slides if you have an opportunity. I think it would have been nice. Well,
May I,
to
through
have
the
a-
chair? I will send all of you the
Looking at-
survey.
Thank
Very
you.
happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, that information, like a copy of what you presented. We're looking at it from here, but if I could look at that to either have it confirmed or debunked, that would be helpful.
I'll be happy to. Thank you all very much. You guys are great to hang out with late at night. So it's okay.
All right, motion to move H5 to the floor.
Move it.
H5 is on the floor, Ms. Hampton, as Ms. Rojas's item.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to thank my colleagues who have co-sponsored this item, Board Chair Hammond, Vice Chair Gallen, and board members Baez-Geller and Bendros-Mendengal, Navarro, Perez, and Santos. Again, thank you very much. This item is the school board's endorsement of the month of September 2021 as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. It is very sad, but we continue to see and hear how high the suicide rate is among young adults and the correlation between suicide and mental health-related issues, which has been totally exacerbated by this pandemic. The isolation that many of these students have had to face, social isolation, has been very detrimental for them.